We're going to come back together in 1 minute's time.
Hi everyone, thank you for praying together like that. We're really glad we could have that time to pray together. We're going to pass back over, do another live cross back to the O'Brien's place, and Sue is going to bring us the Bible reading for today. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Lauren. Just checking you can all hear me?
Yes,
good.
All good.
The Bible reading today comes from 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 7 through to verse 16. Some time later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, that is to Elijah, "Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food." So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, "Oh, and bring me a piece of bread, please." And the widow said, "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and will make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. Then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." She went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. This is the word of the Lord.
This is the fourth week of our series, Home Sweet Home, and we've been asking us to consider especially how God's life and reality becomes apparent to us in the everydayness of our lives, especially since we've been, asked to sort of confine our lives closer to our home base. And the reading this morning, I think, has a special word to us there, because in this very interesting passage, God, as we heard, asks Elijah to go to Phoenicia. This is foreign territory, and find refuge there during this time of the drought. And God tells Elijah, go there because I have commanded a woman who will take care of you. That's in verse 9. And this lady, as we heard, thank you, Sue, for reading, comes to the gate to collect firewood for what she thinks is her very last meal, quite possibly. And I guess she would have been doing that with incredible solemnity. This sense of weight bearing on her that she has only enough flour and oil left for one more loaf of bread. And after that, she expects to starve. And the stress and the worry that she has a son that she can't feed. And as she's doing this, she gets this unknown man who is quite forward and says, hey, would you mind getting me a drink of water? And while you're there, would you mind baking me some bread? And I think in her mind, she must have been thinking, you can go and get your own loaf of bread, mister. Haven't you heard there's a drought on? But she's unfailingly polite, and she says in a gentle way, look, normally, of course, I'd show hospitality, but you need to understand this is my last meal. We have only enough to bake one loaf of bread. And I think she says in a nice way, look, not today. But it's worth noting that at this time, this woman has no inkling that God is inviting her into a miracle. She hasn't had an angel show up and say, well, at about 4:15 in the afternoon, I'm going to send Elijah, the great prophet, and he's going to invite you to participate in an act of God that's going to save you and your family. And as she has no idea, she hasn't heard the command from God. She merely hears this invitation from a stranger, a request saying, I'm in a desperate need, and I'm wondering if you would help me in your desperate need. That is her invitation into the flow of God's action in ordinary life. And she says yes, against common sense really, but she just has a sense that this is God speaking to her in her situation too. And so as we are thinking about, God showing up and God becoming real and obvious in everyday life, we have asked two wonderful people in our congregation, Diane and Catherine, to just engage in a conversation around how that has been for them, how they have experienced that. And so we're going to ask you to listen to this conversation and then give you time at your place, in your home, or in your group to discuss exactly that. How has God become real and apparent in the everyday order of life? Thanks so much, Diane and Catherine, for taking the time to record this conversation.
Well, Di, first up, I want to just thank you for inviting me to have this conversation with you. And I just wondered what it was that inspired you to invite me to have this conversation about how God works in our everyday lives.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. Well, one of the reasons is really to do with PACT, because we have just had so many times when we've felt that God has been with us when we've been caring with people and for people, that I just wanted to share some of those times with you. And it also started when I was sharing some of them with Kim Jennings. I went to visit her after the birth of Joshua, and she's just said, oh, there's so many times when God does enter into our lives and we forget about them and we don't really share them. And she said, it'd be great if you could share some of those things with the congregation. Well, I did think about it a bit, and anyway, the next week John Frederick was speaking about the liturgy of the ordinary. And at that point, I started to prick up my ears and think, oh, I think I'm getting a bit of a prompting to do this. And then I was excitedly telling Matt and Lauren some of these things as well. And Matt said, well, why don't we have a conversation about that? And so I thought about it a bit more and decided that we could do that, and then I rang you to ask you if you'd be willing to do it, and you said yes.
So, Di, there's obviously some stories behind why you spoke to Matt about God entering into everyday life and things that you've been seeing happen in your everyday life too. Yeah,
So I'd love to tell you some. Obviously, I can't tell you all of them, but there's just a couple that stick in my mind that have happened over the last month or so. And one of them is to do with PACT, or both of them are to do with PACT actually. And I was on the phone one day talking to Jane, and we were chatting about a lady that we go and visit about once a month. And we were trying to work out who was going to visit her, and her name is Alice. And it worked. I was fairly busy at the time. And Jane said, look, I've got some time and I will go and see her. Well, she did go and see her just at the right moment, because when she got there, she found Alice, I think she was kneeling down the floor trying to find something, and she'd lost something to do with a hearing aid. I'm not exactly sure what it was. And she was actually saying, oh, God help me, God help me. And Jane knocked on the door, and because Alice always often has her door open a little bit, and she went in, and there was Alice needing some help, and it was just at the right moment, which was amazing. And from that particular time, because Jane had seen Alice struggling a little bit, she rang her daughter just to let her know, and that put us in touch with her daughter again, and we were able to now get her daughter to call us when Alice goes to hospital, and we're able to visit her because his daughter's not able to do that when she's in hospital. So we just felt that God used that situation to be able to help Alice out further and make sure that we keep in contact with her.
And you couldn't have made that happen.
No.
No.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. The second story that I wanted to tell you about, which is also very exciting, was about a lady called Lindsay. She used to be a member of our church, and she had to go to Italy right at the very beginning of COVID to look after her daughter's children. And she had some pretty tough times over there, and we've kept in contact. And now she's in the UK helping out with another member of her family's children, but she also wanted to get a job. And the other background I need to tell you is that the PACT group was meeting on this particular Thursday morning. We only meet once a month now. Anyway, Linda and I have been in contact, emailing on and off, not very often, hadn't really done it for a month or so. Anyway, she sent me an email. I woke up in the morning and found an email saying, oh, could you please pray for me? I've just rejected a job, but I really don't feel that that's right for me. But I'm going for an interview later on in the next couple of days. Would you please pray that I'll be accepted? And as I said, just that very morning, we had a PACT meeting. And so I took that along to the PACT meeting, and we prayed at the beginning of the meeting, and the others remembered her. And just left it at that. And I let her know that we'd prayed and that the people would be open to what she had to say, and the interview would go well. Anyway, about 24 hours later, I had another email from Lindsay saying, oh, thank you so much. The interview went well, and I got the job, and I know that's where God wants me to be. And once again, what are the chances of somebody from UK emailing me at the right moment on the very day when we had a group of people who could pray together and really ask God to be in that space with Lindsay?
It's great, isn't it? It's like you see God's fingerprints on the situation. It's a God thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, oh, how wonderful. That's great. And I'm amazed too that the grace that's there for you as you do that work too.
It's amazing, and it really makes you feel that God has your back.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And you must have lots of incidences as well.
I do, and really the story behind when you rang me was that earlier this year, our daughter, who is 35, and she works in LA about 6 months of the year, and generally she comes home around the end of March, end of April, beginning of May. And this particular year, at the beginning of the year, she decided, just I guess because of circumstances, that she would come home early March. And so she arrived home just a few days before lockdown. So we were so grateful that she was able to leave the country and be back. And she's been working and living with us ever since. And as well as that, another daughter of mine who lives in Papua New Guinea with her fiancé and works up there, she had about 3 or 4 more weeks on her contract, and she and her fiancé were in the supermarket shopping. And a co-worker from DFAT came up and said, "Oh, you might want to think about leaving a bit earlier." And just something in their gut told them that they should just leave the supermarket straight away. And they went home and they packed right through the night.
Wow, at that moment.
At that moment. And they got on a plane the next day, and they just missed, by 24 hours, the frenzy of leaving for the pandemic, and arrived home in Australia just before lockdown as well. And a third thing happened at a very similar period of time, probably about a month prior to that. My son and his partner and their baby girl were living at West End. They were living above their businesses. They have their an event business and an exercise business. And they just put new carpets through and painted in the studio they were living. And they got a sudden urge that they should move. And so they began, just like that. They just began looking for houses. I remember they were staying at our place overnight one night, and they said, "We're going to find a rental property." And they found a rental property.
Wow.
And within a month they'd moved, and they'd moved to 2 streets away from us. And then once again lockdown happened within a week of that move. So, we sort of watched the hand of God in that situation. And then within the next few months we had all these amazing opportunities to get together with these adult children and their families of ours. And you had lots of long chats and meals together and long walks, and I could really feel God was working in our relationships and continuing to build some relationships and rebuilding other relationships. And it's not something we could have,
Well, you could have done on your own.
It just all came together. And so we were really marvelled at that. It was quite extraordinary. And Di, because Adrian and I saw God working there, sometimes when we see God working, we decide to give a little more space to that situation or that opportunity. So we made then intentional efforts to keep coming together. And what we noticed was that we over time built a level of trust with those young adults of ours, children who now have families of their own. And the level of trust meant that when there were difficult conversations, and obviously when adult children, as you have adult children, or anyone who has young adult themselves knows, there's unfinished business that happens, and there are a lot of triggers sometimes in situations when you get together. And so we built a level of trust so that when those difficult moments were there, we were all able to hold space and all able to hear one another and work through those things. So there's a lot of deep healing, a lot of just community building on a deep level that was able to happen. And I guess just by creating a bit more space when we saw God working, we really allowed God to work even more deeply in the situation. So it felt such a privilege to have that opportunity, and of course to be there, to be around this little baby girl as she turned 1 and took her first steps, and all of those lovely, joyous moments were there as well.
And it's about, as you said, taking those opportunities and really building on those and using them for God's work.
Yes. And they're just something we could never have made happen. Was just pure gift for all of us, and we were able to really enjoy that.
And enjoy it.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, so when you rang, that was my moment of gratitude. I was really, enjoying.
And you mentioned about somebody coming up to your daughter in the shopping centre. Well, I have lots and lots of shopping centre stories, and and I know that seems very ordinary, but we're talking about the liturgy of the ordinary here, and it's just some of those sometimes those routine things that God comes to us, and there are a couple of stories I would like to just share with you at the moment, and one of them is from quite some time ago, but it's something that's really stuck in my head, and I've never ever forgotten, because it was so blatantly obvious that it was God's doing. And it was a time when I was feeling very upset about a particular matter, and it was a time when Wayne Middleton was chair and I was secretary, and we were doing quite a few things in the church, and talking about the good things that happened, but also working through some of the issues with not having a minister and so on. and I was feeling particularly upset, and I just didn't feel right about calling him that particular day. It just didn't feel as though it was the right thing to do. And so I thought I'll just let it go. Well, anyway, I had to pick up a couple of things. I virtually never shop on a Saturday afternoon, but anyway, off I went, feeling really miserable and sorry for myself. Well, I went down one aisle and then I went down to the next, and who was there was Wayne Middleton. And I'm still tearing up about it after all these years. And he was just able, in his gentle way, just to go through with me the issue, and I just knew that God was in that situation, and I left that shopping centre just knowing that God had been with us in that moment, and I know that he felt that as
And I
well.
see so much of God's care for you. You know, you were carrying that burden, and God cared for you. Yeah, that's so beautiful.
It's just, as I say, it's several years ago now, but I've never forgotten it. And then again, just recently, with some of the work that we've been doing with PACT and the Care and Connect teams, we've been trying to keep in contact with people. And there was one particular person I was hoping to get in contact with, but just hadn't had a moment or time. Had to do my grocery shopping. Once again, these are the ordinary things that we need to do. I can remember I was getting some fish, and I turned around, and who should be there but Grace? And Grace was the person that, and I know she won't mind me sharing this with you, because I said to her straight away, this is such a God incidence. And we had a lovely chat and found out how she was going. And it was just a really beautiful moment that we shared together.
Yes.
And once again, I just felt that I could not have orchestrated that.
Yes. The thing I love about these moments, Ty, is that it really allows you to kind of sit back with God and go, God, look what you're doing. And it really is a bonding moment with God, isn't it? Because you can sit and watch God work and know that he knows and you know, and we're sharing that moment of watching that work happen together.
That's
So it's just
right.
such a beautiful way of drawing closer to God by seeing those things and acknowledging them.
And, you know, I know some people might think it's a coincidence, but I don't see it like that. I have never seen those people again in the shopping centre since.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
once again, that confirms, you know, to me that God is with us as we go through our everyday lives, and that he's there in the big things as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one other little thing that I've noticed that sometimes happens is that when God is going to be about some work in an area, sometimes he heralds it. You know, when I look at those 3 incidents that happened with my young adult children, that there were 3 sort of unique incidents that had the fingerprints of God on them. And that it was almost heralding, some activity is going to happen here amongst those people. And I have noticed that when God's going to work in our lives, sometimes he heralds it, you know, ahead of time.
That's
And
right.
that was sort of what it was like for me. It was like, you're doing something here, God.
Yes.
Yeah, which was really lovely to be able to kind of be more aware.
That's
Yeah.
right, and it's about being aware of those
Yeah.
tiny things that do happen, and the big things too, but sometimes just the ordinary things that happen, how God is looking for us to use His Spirit in those moments. Yeah. And that's why we're having this conversation, because we really wanted to share this conversation with other people and with people in the congregation that we know are at home watching at this moment and listening at this moment, and encourage people to think about those moments that happen and to remember them, and to let our faith build with those particular moments in those ordinary little things of life.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Di. I've really enjoyed the time together, and we've had times like this before.
We
and
have
shared,
yes.
so it's just great to do this again.
And it's
Thank
lovely
you.
to share them again and catch that excitement again of thinking about the things that God is doing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Di and Catherine, for taking the time to have that discussion together and to share it with us. Something that Di mentioned a few times during that discussion was how God presented her with these opportunities in the supermarket, in the very ordinary supermarket as she was just going about her day, to meet with people that she otherwise would not have met with. And that just reminded Di and Catherine and I, as we were taking part in that discussion and filming it, that Jesus did the same thing. He met with people and ministered to them around the well, in the marketplace, on the road, in these very ordinary places. And how amazing that God continues to do that today in somewhere as simple as the Toowong Village supermarket. So we would like to hand over over the discussion to you now and give you a chance in your home churches, however big or small you are gathered, to have a chat as well about how God reveals himself to you in your everyday life. Maybe you have some examples of this, whether they're big or small. And something that we can remind ourselves of is that even if it might seem small or ordinary to us, if God's acting in it, then it's not ordinary at all, it's extraordinary. So please feel confident to share those things. We're going to show some questions on the screen now for about 12 minutes just to help you jump off into that discussion. If you are on your own, maybe you'd like to read through these discussion questions and just chat to God about this kind of thing and share it with someone later on if you have a chance to catch up with someone for a coffee. But we're passing over to you now. We hope you enjoy that discussion together. Please feel comfortable to share with one another. Thank you.
We'll be coming back together in about 1 minute's time.
Hello, Woodkey family. Could you please stand by and we'll do a live cross to you in just a second to see what you've been up to. Thank you.
Okay, stand by, mate. Can you hear me